One of the most fascinating scams that ever occurred involved Emmanuel Nwode, a Nigerian scammer who managed to sell a fake airport to a Brazilian bank. Emmanuel Nwode, the mastermind behind the scam, had previously worked as a director of the Union Bank of Nigeria. His banking background gave him access to the knowledge, documentation, and links that made him more believable when it came to executing his scam. Emmanuel's experience as a bank director meant that he had ample knowledge of how to conduct himself in a business setting and probably had a certain confidence about him that put his victims at ease. To execute his scam, Emmanuel impersonated Paul Okwuma, who at the time was the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. With the help of his accomplices and his new identity, Emmanuel was able to connect with Nelson Sakaguchi, the then director of the Brazilian bank, Banco Noroeste. Emmanuel pitched the idea of getting the Brazilian bank involved in developing the Nigerian economy by investing in the building of a new airport in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Emmanuel sweetened the deal for Nelson by informing him that should the deal be successful, he would be in line to pocket $10 million as commission. The promise of a hefty payout was enough to intrigue Nelson, and he fell for the scam. Between 1995 and 1998, he paid the fraudsters $191 million in cash and the remaining $51 million in the form of outstanding interest from Banco Noroeste. Emmanuel and his crew almost got away with the scam. But things began to unravel when Banco Santander, a Spanish bank, wanted to take over the Brazilian bank in August 1997. The discrepancy could not be sufficiently explained as there was no new airport in Abuja. Formal investigations were initiated. Criminal investigations also had to be carried out in multiple jurisdictions, which included Brazil, Nigeria, Switzerland, and England. In an effort to ensure that the sale of the Brazilian bank still went through, the owners of the bank had to pay the missing $242 million from their own pockets. Despite this, the Brazilian bank eventually collapsed. Although the scam took place between 1995 and 1998, Emmanuel and his accomplices were only brought to court in 2004. Despite a confession from one of his accomplices, Emmanuel still tried to evade justice by attempting to bribe the chairman of the EFCC with $75,000. This did not end well for him as the chairman refused the bribe, resulting in additional bribery charges being added to Emmanuel's docket. The prosecutors in the matter managed to secure as a witness Nelson Sakaguchi, the man who had been conned into making payments for the non-existent airport. Following his testimony, Emmanuel and the rest of his remaining crew plead guilty. Emmanuel was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay $10 million as a fine to the federal government. This seems like a very small amount for someone who had defrauded a bank of over $200 million. The fine was probably a mere drop in the ocean for him.